Morning, everybody. Welcome to DiscoverEE. Welcome back from your summer. Here we are at our inaugural fall discovery session. We'll just wait a couple more minutes. We'll see who's coming in and we'll get going from there. Okay. I'm seeing people filing in, so I think we can probably get going. Welcome again. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's morning for me. It's almost afternoon for Corey. Welcome to our Friday discovery session. This is the first one of the fall, and we're very pleased to have you here. So my name is Allison Mostowich. I am the Director of Engagement at Efficiency Canada, and I am joining you from Calgary, Alberta. That is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And while we are a remote workplace, Efficiency Canada is based at Carleton University, which is located in the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. So we had a bit of a last minute change this morning and then last night. So we're going to do a bit of a format today. Today is going to be an Ask Me Anything with Corey Diamond. I encourage you all to get your questions ready. We are going to start out with a little bit of what's going on at Efficiency Canada. So I will hand that to Corey. So in the background, like I said, get your questions ready. You can type them in the question and answer box. If you want to be unmuted, we're going to try something new and we're going to unmute people today. So just let me know if you'd like to ask your own question, and I'll just ask you to keep it succinct so we give everybody the opportunity to ask questions. So with that, Corey, why don't you let us know what's going on at Efficiency Canada right now?
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to pinch hit on this week's discovery and just open it up. There's so much going on, as usual, in the world of energy efficiency policy. So hopefully we can be of use to you and answer any questions, burning questions you may have. But maybe I thought it would be helpful just to start off with, just what we're up to, some of the kind of key policy focus areas that we're working on, some of the projects coming up, just so you get a sense of kind of what our little group has been focused on over the last few weeks and into the fall. Many of you know that we are very involved in building codes and building code adoption across the country. We were very happy to see the federal government adopt a new tact on building codes for new buildings. And we now have a pathway in front of us to see every single new building in Canada essentially move towards net zero energy ready. A big part of that is going to be how provinces and municipalities adopt the latest version of the building code, what tier they do that, and then how the federal government can support them through the Building Code Adoption Fund, which was announced in Budget 2022. So we're working with a number of large municipalities across the country to get net zero building codes adopted for new construction. So we feel that the role of municipalities is exceptionally important. Many municipalities across the country are actually moving faster than their provincial counterparts, and there's an opportunity to support them so they have what they need, everything down to the level of building officials, to capacity building, to training, so that they can be the first to adopt higher tiers of the code. In addition to that, we have put together, and if you haven't seen it, check our website, the Action on Building Codes Council. So it's a group of hardcore building code advocates from across the country that advocate regionally to support strong building code adoption. So we've got the work that's happening at the municipal level and then regionally at the provincial level as well. And then we will be releasing this fall a building code guide for municipal officials. So a very simple kind of step-by-step way for municipal officials to understand what's happening with the new code and what they can do to drive it. And we'll support that with the discovery session as well. So that's on new buildings. On existing buildings, we are close to bringing a new team member on shortly who's going to focus on codes and the role that building performance standards play for existing buildings. A new policy that is gaining a lot of steam in many states and cities in the US around building performance standards, essentially setting a standard of how much energy an existing building can use. And then from that, ratcheting that down over time and then supporting through various different incentives and programs and things. So we're going to be ratcheting that up. It's great to see places like the City of Vancouver, who's adopted a building performance standard, and we'd like to support other municipalities and provinces across the country on that as well. So if you've got any thoughts, ideas, expertise on that, then reach out to us. As many of you know, if you've been following our work, we have been doing a lot on energy efficiency for low-income households. In the spring, we released our research report on policy solutions called Efficiency for All, which basically looked at what's happening across the country at the provincial level and then the gaps that the federal government can can fill through its own. Over the summer, we've been focusing on supporting constituents to meet with their MPs to tell their stories about this, because we feel that the pressure, local pressure on elected officials is an important way to get this on the radar. And then we've got a broad kind of awareness campaign launching this fall as MPs return into Ottawa, as well as our regular advocacy work. And we feel this is one of the most important policies, especially as the Green Building Strategy gets released, ensuring that no one is left behind as part of that, but also ensuring that affordability, cost of living, things like that can easily tank any strong climate action. And certainly people on the opposition, the people who are thinking about encouraging the federal government not to move fast on climate issues, are using this as a reason not to. So certainly we feel there's a great opportunity now, not only from a justice standpoint to help those who most need it, but also to continue to drive aggressive climate change policy at the federal. Related to that, we're also working on a report that brings together some of the social issues and the climate issues, specifically around tenant rights and energy efficiency. So we're working on a report that outlines sort of a framework of policies that considers the mix of, how to ensure that when you're implementing strong energy efficiency policies or climate policies, that they also empower tenant rights and don't lead to things like evictions, where landlords can make material changes to their buildings and then raise rents and things like that. So there's some experience around the world on how to protect tenants during this, so that you're enhancing affordability, security, and comfort, but as well as making sure that energy efficiency isn't being used as an excuse to turn over tenants. My colleague James has been working on an industrial energy efficiency project that was supported through a grant from Scotiabank, really looking at the policy gaps and the solutions in Canada to boost more strategic energy management and energy management systems, which we feel is a burgeoning area of energy efficiency, especially in Canada. There's a lot of great practitioners and people working on this, but we do need a much stronger kind of policy system around it. And that's what that report will say when we release that in a couple months. And we'll also promote that on DiscoverEE as well. So look for that. Many of us through our provincial energy efficiency scorecard that we release every year. So that will be released again this November, where we benchmark and look at all the programs and policies across the country from provinces and territories. And then we also rank them and celebrate those that are doing great and highlight those that need to keep going and do better. And we find the scorecard continues to work throughout the year as different policymakers on all sides from all different parties use it as a way to encourage and engage elected officials to do even more. So we'll be doing that again this year, so look out for that. And then lastly, my colleagues Kelsey and Cede have been doing a lot of work on workforce development. Many of you know about our DiscoverEE Hub, which is our career hub where people can go to find out what it's like to enter the energy efficiency workforce, how to get a job, what kinds of training and work you need to do to enter the pathway of different career options. And we just launched a career job board, so people can go on it and seek out new jobs and figure out how to do that. We are developing what we're calling a career guides approach, where people can connect with champions in the sector who are through our human energy program, who have done exceptional work in their careers and can provide advice and support on how to build a career in this sector. So pretty exciting stuff there. And that's only going to continue into 2023 as we see that we can be extremely successful at all the policies that I just mentioned, but without a workforce to do it and inspiring people to enter the workforce, then they're just policies on paper without actual implementation. So those are kind of all the things that our little shop is working on. Some things related to the future into 2023 that we've been thinking about, projects related to new business models and looking at specifically how we can create complete new business models to take on more efficiency upgrades, specifically around retrofits and combining HVAC insulation, windows installation into kind of a whole home business model. We're going to be doing some work with some partners on advocating to the federal government on how they can regulate the most efficient heating possible across the country, which has been mentioned in the emissions reduction plan and in mandate letters to Minister Wilkinson. And then also to broaden out our kind of workforce development, just to look at kind of sector capabilities. What is Canada good at in the energy efficiency sector, and what kinds of supports do we need from the federal government to help create more activity? So what kinds of policies or tax treatment or other kinds of things that could enable the sector to hire more people, do more work, change into new business models and things like that, so that the federal government's not only driving through policy, but also through building out a sector and understanding better the capabilities. So lots going on as per usual, and as per usual with this sector, because there isn't one silver bullet of policy, but lots of little things that add up to big things. And the last thing I'll say is, just having been in this role for 4 or 5 years and been in this sector for most of my career, there is significant momentum happening right now. And there is an opportunity over the next, I would say, 18 to 24 months where some real legacy type stuff can happen, real transformative work related to basically ensuring every new building is net zero energy ready, and that all existing buildings are being encouraged to use as little energy as possible through policy, and implementing a national low-income strategy to do that. So those three things could really, long-term baked in real legacy type transformative stuff. Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, at least from our perspective, to be involved in working on that.
Just a few things. Thanks so much, Corey. That's awesome to hear about what Efficiency Canada's got going on. So we are going to switch over to some audience questions now. I do have a couple questions in the background, and some of them are a little bit more technical. I'm going to just preface this by saying, if it's really super technical, maybe the best thing to do, if we're talking about metrics, the best thing to do might be just to get a hold of us in the background, and we can try to answer your question there. Because if it means us digging through documents, nobody wants to do that. Let's get started. And I'm just going to remind everybody too, so you can actually upvote questions. So if you like a question in the question and answer and you would like to see that answered, upvote it and we'll get to that one quicker. So let's get to a few of the questions that are already in there. Let's start with an easy one. So the tenant rights report that you had mentioned, do we have some timing on when that's going to be released?
Yeah, we are planning for that to be released in the new year. So January is certainly where it's set right now. There's some work we need to do, obviously, on understanding a little bit of the landscape of the policies, like the policy ecosystem, and then who is responsible and who can be responsible. Some are easy or easier. For example, if the federal government is providing a grant or an incentive on upgrades and things like that, they can actually say in that if you have stipulations written right into it, that money would be clawed back or not released if certain actions were taken, like a renovation or something like that. And then there are others that I think are a little more complicated by trying to line up federal, provincial, and municipal policies to better understand where they may be able to be used together. So it's a bit of a complex system that we're working on to kind of review, but January would be our date for that.
Awesome. And if you're not signed up for our newsletter for updates, you can certainly sign up for those on our website, and you'll get the latest news and many reports or blogs, things like that. So Nick asked a really good question. This is actually getting upvoted. Which key issues do you believe are on the horizon that the federal, provincial, or municipal policymakers haven't really focused their attention on yet?
I'm just going to close my window. Herbert's truck is here. Leave it up to Nick to ask me the tough one. So thanks. So one that comes to mind, I mentioned it in passing in my update, is building performance standards. And it's something that we're very interested in. So essentially what this is, setting through first, obviously, benchmarking and disclosure and labeling programs. A building understands how much energy it uses. And then over time, there are levels that they need to reach by certain time milestones. This is a burgeoning way to encourage, especially commercial building owners, to do more and to do them faster. The most famous example of this happening is in New York City, where buildings had a very short, limited amount of time to do the retrofits required to meet the lower standard. But what we're seeing in the US is a coalition of 60 plus cities and states that have come together, led by the Institute for Market Transformation, and it's called the Building Performance Standard Coalition. pretty good name for something working on that. And they've got together and tried to make it easier for cities that are interested in this by essentially a clearinghouse of the policy, exactly how to write it into a municipal bylaw, how to write it into a state law, how to create the parameters, when to ratchet down. So that's moving really. Vancouver is the first in Canada to do this. Montreal is soon. Toronto has talked about it. So there's starting to be some movement here. But I think that's an area where we feel there's a lot of momentum and a lot of kind of push if we can get behind it. We were a little dismayed to see that it was not in the draft green building strategy that was released last month. So in our comments to NRCan, we'll be putting that in, saying that this is certainly a policy that we need to see happen, and support from the federal government to enable provinces and cities to do it, or ideally a national strategy that helps to implement it.
Awesome, thank you. So why don't we just expand on that a little bit? Do you want to talk a little bit, and I know we've received this question from a few of our allies, do you want to expand a little bit on what we're submitting for the green building strategy, where we see some of the policy gaps?
Sure. And so for those that aren't hardcore nerds like us and follow all the consultation periods, essentially what's going on now is the federal government in budget 2022 provided $150 million available to NRCan to basically implement a number of policies, including launching a national consultation process on what is called the green building strategy. So if we are getting ourselves on a path between now and 2050, where every new and existing building is net zero energy and is fully decarbonized, what would we need to do as a country? And so it lays out a number of themes that will get us there, and then a number of programs and policy areas that will help. So that is currently open for comment. And I don't know, maybe in between questions, Allison, you can just put the link for people. We are going to publish our comments. So to inspire people, I think it's due on the 16th. So you have about a week to get yours in, and we'll provide ours to, exactly what we're saying. But there are, like in anything like this, there's the good and the bad, right? There's some really good things in it that we feel are going to get us to where we need to be, specifically areas and emphasis around market transformation, sticking with the roadmap that the federal government had created a number of years ago on heating, that really a lot of this is going to be about the federal government's role in transforming markets, which would then attract activity and investment from other actors. The other theme that we really like too is that there is still a role for what they call mandating change, which is essentially regulation. And ideally, if done well, you set the market towards a certain goal, and then at the end, you're able to regulate. So there's something to be said about supporting markets to transform and then coming in at the end with tough regulation. So we feel like there's some good stuff in there related to it. But there are some gaps. And certainly the first gap that we noticed, as I mentioned, is that there isn't as much an emphasis on low income energy efficiency and on affordability. In Canada, we've got 4.9 million Canadians who are at risk of energy poverty, people who are low income Canadians and can't access the programs that other people can. They can't participate in greener homes because of the upfront costs, and they're not going to go into further debt and try to get loans through the Greener Homes Loans Program. We need a specific strategy on low income, and we feel like if we don't do this, obviously there's a justice and equity issue, and it's immoral not to do it. But the entire strategy is vulnerable because it's easy for anybody who wants to go slow on climate issues to say, we can't do this now because of the enormous cost that's being put on people and affordability and equity, things like that. So we want to make sure that from a political perspective, the green building strategy stays strong, but it also, and in order to do that, you're going to have to need this baked into it and essentially set a goal that part of the green building strategy's goal is to eliminate energy poverty in this country. I mentioned the building performance standards as a gap. That's another one. And a third one is really setting some timelines. So one of the things we're really encouraging the federal government is to learn about and be inspired by other countries that are moving in a certain direction. Both Germany and the Netherlands have set specific dates for completely transforming how heating happens in the country and the implementation of new heating systems to be zero carbon by a certain date. So we need to do that as well. And then by setting that date and sending that signal, You then develop the market transformation strategies and support to help Canada get there. But without that date and without that kind of regulation at the end, it just becomes something or aspirational that we want to do. And then the last thing that are going to be in our comments are really around the role that the federal government can play with provinces. Certainly, most of the heavy lifting related to energy efficiency in this country happens at the provincial level and increasingly at the municipal level. And we really feel that a national green building strategy should lay out essentially the expectations of what each province and municipality can and should do, support those strategies, and then the federal government fills in the rest. And this is similar to what, if for those that follow this stuff in the European Union, they have a very similar model where you've got the EU and then you've got all 34 member states underneath. There's essentially a European Union directive that kind of says to each member state, you shall do this, and this is what we expect from you. We're going to provide funding and support to make that happen. But without that kind of prerequisite list, you don't get that kind of support. And that kind of governance model and support and partnership. And the federal government has done excellent work with provinces over the years, specifically in energy efficiency. So there's an opportunity to really ramp that up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Corey. I think that was a good segue for the next question, talking about some of the different moves that Europe is making in terms of incorporating energy efficiency. So Martin Green is asking about district energy, and he's saying in some of our own reports that we've recognized that there is major challenges in terms of retrofitting existing buildings. And he's talking about the benefits of district energy, that it could be a quarter of the cost and much faster than some other mechanisms to retrofit buildings. So he's talking about our interest in looking at district energy as an alternative pathway for non-rural districts.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And one of the things we always say is, obviously we talk about building decarbonization, transportation, industrial decarbonization through specific programs that boost efficiency. But we gotta understand, and we certainly do, maybe it doesn't come through a lot in our work, that energy efficiency policy is a subset of broader climate change or industrial policy. Just saying that we're going to solve everything through energy efficiency is short-sighted. So how energy efficiency enables and plays into other bigger policies, like how we're going to decarbonize our grid if there's going to be broader electrification. How are we going to electrify all of our heating and vehicles without thinking about energy sources and a grid and solutions like district heating that would then enable us to do that faster? Of course, we recognize that. We'd love to be part of those kinds of conversations. We just don't have a lot of capacity. Right now there's 14 of us at Efficiency Canada working on multiple different policy areas that we've tried to identify as priorities for us and where our expertise is and where we think we can have the greatest influence. But certainly we are interested in lending our support and our expertise where we can to groups that are pushing for other types of climate solutions. So we have done that with other groups. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. It's not an area that we have a lot of expertise in, so we haven't done a lot of research on it, but certainly we are interested in seeing how efficiency plays in as a policy to support things like district heating.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. Okay, next question. So this question is about provinces supporting demand-side management programs. So the question is about which provinces do currently support demand-side management programs and allow them to be included in rate. And the question is also asking whether we see initiatives where regulators are considering shifting back to supporting energy efficiency programs.
Right. Yeah. In a number of provinces in Canada, we do have systems whereby utilities are mandated by their regulator in order to continue offering energy, either through electricity or natural gas to customers. They must enable those customers to use less energy, and a certain percentage, usually based on revenue and also on the impact it has on bills. And they have cost effectiveness tests in order to determine what those levels are. And they do vary across the country. So there are many different provinces that do it. We can put this in the chat, but we do have a data that is associated with our scorecard that basically outlines what each province is doing and how it funds its utilities to do it. Some are done directly through rates, I know in Ontario, and others are done in different ways through quasi-governmental, what we call program administrators. So it does vary across the country. The only place that does not have a utility-led or a program that is driven through something like this is Alberta. And I know our friend Jesse Rowe and the Alberta Energy Efficiency Alliance are doing a ton of work, really, really smart kind of strategic work on that, even with the utilities who are calling for it. So maybe if you're interested in the Alberta side, then check in with that. And if you're interested in other provinces, check our database.
Fantastic. So I just posted the database in the chat if anybody's interested in that. Okay, next question. Any examples of federal, provincial, or municipal regulations to include embodied carbon in the definition of net zero buildings?
Excellent question. In fact, like minutes before, my colleague Kevin Lockhart gave me an update on this. I'll just fill you all in. Essentially, what the federal government has done is it got the 2020 Model Building Code out, which all the provinces have agreed to harmonize, meaning that they will adopt the 2020 Model Building Code within 18 months at one of the 5 tiers. And while that's out, the federal government has also promised through its mandate letter to Minister Wilkinson and through its policy that it will move towards considering embodied emissions in the next building code cycle. So the steps in that are a bit erudite, but I'll try to explain it in a way that makes sense. Essentially, NRCan will put forward a code change request. So they send a code change request to the CCBFC, so the Codes Commission essentially, and essentially requesting that a new objective be considered in the next building code, and that be embodied carbon and emissions. So that is a really important and necessary step forward because it does clear the way for net zero emission, which is still really in the early stages of creating what that framework looks like. And it's a very important piece because now the CCBFC, which is the commission, now has to deliberate on what that means and how they do it. So what's the impact on codes? What's the impact on jurisdictions? What's the impact on industry? Like, how do we do this? And how fast can we move in this given the direction that the federal government has mandated? So it is moving, and it's moving also not only on new buildings, but the federal government also has a sort of parallel process that's called the AEB, which is the alterations to existing building code. So a building code essentially for existing buildings. And that will need to be considered as well, how to balance embodied emissions as well in it. So it's all happening. It's a very live conversation. If you're interested in more of the details, shoot us a note. Kevin Lockhart on our team we were joking today in our team meeting, he's a celebrity in the building code world, but he's always happy to chat with anyone about it and then see how he can support you in advocating for it. So that's the status, but definitely a live conversation that we're definitely a big part of.
Awesome, that's a great update. Okay, so question about the Canada Infrastructure Bank. What role does the Canada Infrastructure Bank play in all of this?
Yeah, good question. So only in the last, I would say, couple of years has the Canada Infrastructure Bank taken on more of a role in providing investment money into the system to drive retrofits of buildings. And just a quick kind of context or history lesson, the Canada Infrastructure Bank was set up a number of years ago, $35 billion to spur market investment in infrastructure and to get money out there. And it wasn't really set up as an impact-based investor. It was more just, let's get infrastructure projects going. But recently, it's been used more and more for that, for bigger projects that also have kind of a decarbonization angle. So there was $2 billion set aside for energy, for retrofits of large commercial buildings. And I see that continuing to grow. They've done some great work already. If you go to their website, there's a list of projects that they're already supporting. And I find that one of the greatest things that the Canada Infrastructure Bank can do, in addition to obviously putting money into the system, is to create really good, strong case studies to show and to de-risk future investments like it. So if the Canada Infrastructure Bank comes first and says, we're going to do this kind of investment, we feel not only are we going to get a rate of return on this, but we're also going to get the kind of decarbonization that we need. That provides inspiration for the market to then bring other funds into it for similar types of projects. So the best thing they can do is say, this is how you outline what a green retrofit looks like and what we are considering when we invest. And if it works, then that checklist can then be used by any private investor as they try to decarbonize their real estate portfolio as well. So to me, the $2 billion is great. Obviously, to you and I, $2 billion is a lot of money, but in the amount of money that's being invested in the real estate in Canada, it's peanuts. So the greatest thing that it can do as it continues to invest is make sure that they're showing that these are really strong investments and that others in the private sector can then do similar projects with knowing that they'll get a rate of return, but also meet targets that they've set to reduce their real estate emissions.
That sounds like it would make a great discovery session.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Okay, so just circling back to embodied carbon. I'm sorry, Christina, I missed this before we moved on to the next question, but we'll go back in time. So if embodied carbon was to come into code, do you feel like building teams are prepared to calculate and incorporate embodied carbon into their construction process? And if not, what's missing?
Absolutely not. And not being an engineer or anything, I don't know the details of it, but there's definitely a lack of data right now in every aspect related to embodied emissions and embodied carbon. So one of the big things that has to happen alongside this is a really strong process to collect and analyze data and make that data available to anyone who is thinking about this. And without a common set of data and a common metric system for people to look at, it's going to be very difficult for people to make decisions on how to meet embodied emissions code. I know Kevin on our team works with lots of different people across the country. Chris Magwood is a leader in this, and he's done some work on this, but agreement on the data is going to be really important, and that needs to start right now. I know there's some work being done at the federal government on working with industry, specifically like cement and concrete around that, and how to make sure that there's a common set of rules to track this so that people know and that they're not just saying that it's a zero emission cement. So there's some work being done there. I think a lot more needs to be done at all levels of how a building is constructed. Not easy. So we're definitely not there yet. And we need a lot more effort and support to build out that common set. And then from there, then we can then say, okay, this is what we agree on. Now we can mandate kind of certain changes and things.
Fantastic. Okay, so a bit more of an existential question. What are you the most encouraged by right now?
Good question. I don't know. As you asked that, I was like, okay, I know the cheesy answer, but the cheesy answer is the right answer, which is people. Like, I'm the most encouraged every day when I talk to people, when I get to work with these great people at Efficiency Canada, all our partners and everyone. It's the passion of the people in this sector that are going to make this thing happen. There's no other way. And it used to be a bit of a dynamic where we'd have people who are advocates and NGOs like pushing from the outside. You'd have people inside government who are doing things. You'd have kind of funders and other stakeholders around. And there'd be these weird power dynamics, kind of people protecting turf and things like that. It's no longer like that. And what we have now is this interlaced network, really good, strong, passionate people who play different roles. And there's someone in the civil service, and there's someone in on the political side, and there's someone at the funder, and there's someone in our team, and everybody's working together to play their role to achieve something big at the end. So to me, that's encouraging that we're all just like a bunch of good people trying to come together to drive transformative change that has existential outcomes. And so it's an exciting time. There's so many awesome, great people that we work with. There's people that we featured as part of our Human Energy who are just like have the most amazing, passionate, excellent stories of their career paths, who love talking about this stuff and inspire others to come into the sector. That's what's going to get us there. And so, yeah, policies, when we win, it's like awesome. And obviously our group, if we get a win or we get some new funding and stuff, it's great. And we all are super happy. But to me, the encouragement comes from just like all of you, like just the people out there. So that's my cheesy but real answer, because it's true.
Okay, so we're out of audience questions. Oh, and just as I say that, something else comes in. Of course, I was going to say last call for questions. So maybe I'm just going to read this question. It's a bit long, but while I do that, talk about some of the conversations you're having right now that are exciting to you, or where you're seeing some really key and critical movement.
Yeah, so I just have a slice of our work. Others are having conversations all day, every day, and I have certain conversations and things. So from my perspective, the slice that is interesting is there really is a recognition now that it used to be we were all siloed in kind of the do-gooding world, and you'd have climate people here and social equity people here and people working on anti-racism here. And even within the climate, there was like, oh, we just work on cars and you work on buildings. And a lot of that has disappeared. And I think the recognition that the same power structures that have got us to where the world is today are, all of our solutions are aimed at eliminating and bringing down those kinds of power structures. To me, what's really exciting, the conversations I have, are get to be where we're advancing policies that have impact on more than one typical kind of siloed issue. And so I love the work we're doing on kind of energy poverty and eliminating energy poverty, because it opens us up to having different discussions with different people. I was talking to Luke Connell from Omega Foundation recently, and he was telling me that one of the coolest things they do to try to help encourage more low-income people to take advantage of these kind of free programs on energy efficiency is they work with tax consultants. So they work with accountants that essentially do taxes for people that can't afford to get accountants. And through that process, they're identifying people that are perfect candidates for someone to come in and do some energy upgrades for them. So just so many cool things where you see these great intersections between kind of driving solutions for one also impacts solutions for another. And then you realize that it really is one big kind of fight. And if you're smart and you've created good partnerships, then you can address multiple issues at the same time with the same solutions. So that's pretty cool. And that's an exciting kind of thing to be part of when I stumble into those conversations.
Awesome, thanks. The question that just came in is actually an update from Enercan. I'm assuming Peter Greenberg, you work with Enercan. Sure sounds that way. So he's saying that Enercan, the Buildings and Industry Division, has just launched a new project to capture data on embodied carbon in the built environment, which is super exciting. And that sounds like another great discovery session. So we'd love to hear about that if you're interested in talking about it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Peter.
They're working in collaboration with Natural Resources Canada, as well as ECCC, to leverage Canada's system of national accounts to define, develop, and implement a top-down approach to capturing important indicators. And he says they're just starting, but it's an important national level step and very exciting. So that's awesome.
Very cool.
So with that, we are at or about time here. Thank you everybody for coming today. I know it was not part of your regularly scheduled programming, but we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. Thank you so much, Corey, for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with everybody. And I will just mention that if you are interested in learning more about Efficiency Canada updates, like I was mentioning before, please join our email list. If you want to take it a step further, we do have an ally program where you'll get the insider information about the conversations we're having and the work we're doing before we even release it, and the ability to be part of these conversations. So if you are interested at all in becoming an ally with Efficiency Canada, reach out to me. Happy to chat anytime. So thank you everyone for coming today. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the sunshine if you have it, because we're going to run out of it soon.
Thanks, Allison. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.